In 2008, while the world was drowning in a financial crisis, an Indian automaker made one of the boldest moves in corporate history. Tata Motors acquired Jaguar Land Rover from Ford Motor Company for just $2.3 billion. At the time, many analysts called it reckless. Jaguar and Land Rover were bleeding money, demand was collapsing, and luxury cars were the last thing people wanted during a recession. But Tata had a different vision. Backed by the legacy of the Tata Group, Tata Motors didn't see CJLR as a burden. They saw it as a gateway to the global luxury market. Instead of cutting corners, Tata did something rare. They protected British jobs, they kept factories running, invested in design, engineering, and brand identity. Slowly, the gamble started paying off. By the mid-2010s, Jaguar Land Rover had transformed into Tata Motors' biggest asset, eventually contributing over 70% of total revenue and nearly 80% of overall profitability. Models like the Land Rover Defender became global bestsellers. UK factories in the West Midlands and Merseyside were producing nearly 1,000 cars a day, employing over 16,000 workers. With a worldwide workforce crossing 38,000, Tata Motors had officially become a global luxury automotive player. But success didn't mean stability. Fast forward to 2025. Jaguar Land Rover was hit by a massive cyberattack, costing nearly £5 million per day and halted production. Payroll systems were breached, sensitive employee data was exposed. At the same time, new US tariffs on British-made vehicles forced export pauses. Wholesale volumes dropped by over 24%, and JLR posted a quarterly loss of 3,486 crore. Once again, the company stood at a crossroads. In response, Tata launched the bold Reimagine strategy, a complete transformation toward electric luxury vehicles. Jaguar is now being repositioned as an electric brand. Land Rover is shifting its iconic SUVs to electric platforms. And in early 2026, Tata opened a new advanced manufacturing plant in Ranipet, India, capable of producing 250,000 vehicles annually. The message is clear. This isn't just about survival, it's about reinvention. From a risky $2.3 billion acquisition to a global luxury empire facing a new electric future, Tata Motors and Jaguar Land Rover prove one thing. In business, growth is never permanent. By the early 2020s, Tata Motors had already proven it could turn around struggling brands. But just when things seemed stable, its crown jewel, Jaguar Land Rover, entered one of the most turbulent phases in its history. The first major shock arrived in late 2025. A sustained cyberattack crippled JLR's operations across the UK. Production lines slowed. Payroll systems were breached. Sensitive employee data was potentially exposed. Every single day of disruption cost the company nearly £5 million. Factories in the West Midlands and Merseyside, once producing close to 1,000 vehicles, daily were suddenly fighting just to stay operational, but that was only the beginning. Almost simultaneously, new US tariffs slapped a 25% duty on British-made cars. Exports were paused. Inventory piled up. Wholesale volumes dropped by more than 24%. Within months, Jaguar Land Rover reported a quarterly loss of 3,486 crore. For Tata Motors, this was alarming. JLR was indeed just another subsidiary. It generated around 71% of Tata Motors' revenue and nearly 80% of its profitability. Any disruption here sent shockwaves through the entire group. Behind closed doors, executives scrambled. Costs were slashed. Aircraft-style efficiency audits were introduced across plants. Over 80 aircraft-style vehicle leases were rejected. More than a dozen airports and routes linked to logistics were exited. Fleet plans were downsized. At the same time, JLR began overhauling its digital backbone, partnering internally with Tata's tech ecosystem to strengthen ERP systems and supply chain resilience. Yet even with these moves, the pressure didn't ease. Global competition intensified. Luxury EV startups were eating into market share. Traditional rivals were accelerating electric transitions, and customers were becoming more cautious amid economic uncertainty. Suddenly, the same acquisition once praised as visionary was being questioned again. Was Tata's global luxury dream starting to crack? Internally, leadership knew the old playbook wouldn't work anymore. This wasn't a temporary dip. It was a structural shift in the auto industry. Combustion engines were fading. Software was becoming as important as horsepower, and sustainability was no longer optional. So Tata made a bold call. Instead of defending the past, they chose to redesign the future. This moment marked the turning point, the bridge between survival and reinvention. Because history had taught Tata something powerful. You don't escape disruption by cutting costs alone. You escape it by transforming your entire business model. And that realization would lead directly to the most ambitious chapter yet, the electric overhaul known as Reimagine. So here's the part most people never talk about. In 2008, when the world was collapsing under a global financial crisis, two legendary British brands were being quietly written off. Sales were crashing. Factories were bleeding cash. Analysts called them dead assets. That est when Tata Motors stepped in and bought Jaguar Land Rover from Ford Motor Company for just $2.3 billion. Most people laughed. Why would an Indian company take on struggling luxury brands in the middle of a crisis? But what looked like madness was actually strategy. Tata didn't rush to cut corners. They didn't strip assets. They didn't fire teams just to look profitable. Instead, they did something rare in corporate history. They trusted the engineers, protected the workers, and invested in long-term vision. Slowly, JLR came back to life. New models launched. Design improved. Technology upgraded. And iconic vehicles like the Defender turned into global bestsellers. Today, Jaguar Land Rover generates the majority of revenue and profit for Tata Motors. What was once called a risky gamble became the backbone of an entire automotive empire under the Tata Group. But here's the real lesson. Success doesn't mean the story ends. Even after this historic turnaround, JLR faced fresh storms, cyberattacks, supply chain chaos, rising costs, and tariff pressure. Profits dipped, production slowed. Thousands of jobs were at risk. The company had to reinvent itself again, this time betting big on electric vehicles through its Reimagine strategy. That's business. There is no permanent victory. It's only constant adaptation. And this is where most companies fail. They win once, then stop evolving. Tata didn't. They doubled down on electrification. They modernized factories. They restructured operations. They accepted short-term pain for long-term survival. Because real empires aren't built by avoiding collapse. They're built by surviving it. So if you're watching this and thinking business success is about quick money, hype, or viral growth, think again. The Tata JLR story proves something powerful. Vision beats ego. Patience beats panic, and leadership beats shortcuts. Sometimes the greatest comebacks don't start with confidence. Start with courage. And remember this. Every company you admire today was once one bad decision away from disaster. The difference is, who had the discipline to rebuild? If you enjoyed this real rise and fall story, the kind that shows what actually happens behind billion-dollar headlines, make sure you subscribe to Biz Decoded, because the next collapse story is even more shocking. And trust me, you don't want to miss it.